Okay, let's dive in. Picture this. You're hunkered down somewhere in Stalingrad, late 42. Just ruins everywhere. Smoke, the cold concrete dust.
Grim scene.
Yeah. And you've been there maybe 10 hours, maybe more. Completely still. You finally get your shot. German officer pops his head up for a second.
High-value target.
Right. He drops. Now, everything you've ever learned, every manual screams one thing. Move. Now.
Absolutely. Standard procedure. Your position's blown. Counterfire's coming.
Mortars, maybe infantry rushing you, staying put. Well, the odds aren't great. Marginal, really.
Suicide odds, some might say.
Exactly. But here in Stalingrad, Soviet doctrine demanded something else, something terrifying. You stay.
You stay put.
Motionless. You take that insane risk because you know your presence, just being there, silent. That's what disrupts the Germans. That buys time, buys life even for the guys fighting behind you.
And that decision, that conscious acceptance of what felt like, well, suicidal odds, that's our focus today.
Right.
We're digging into this really high-risk Soviet sniper tactic. The mission here is to unpack how it came about in Stalingrad's ruins, why it made any kind of tactical sense in that hellscape, and look at the evidence behind this powerful claim that it actually saved thousands of Soviet lives.
By stalling the German advance?
Critically stalling it, yeah. And arguably the most pivotal battle on the Eastern Front.
So it's about survival, sure, but also sacrifice. And the cold calculation behind extreme risk. If you want to get right into how one soldier, basically frozen in place, could genuinely shift the tide of a massive battle, well, this is where we start.
All right, so let's set the scene properly. We can't really grasp the tactic without understanding just how bad Stalingrad was in, summer and autumn of 42.
You really can't. The context is everything.
So what were the Germans actually trying to do there? It wasn't just any city they picked off the map.
Oh, definitely not. It was a linchpin, strategically huge. The Wehrmacht had pushed incredibly deep into Soviet land, and Hitler himself was fixated on Stalingrad, Volgograd today, of course. Why Stalingrad specifically?
Two main reasons. One, control the Volga River. It was the main artery, for moving Soviet supplies north-south. Choke that off.
Big blow.
Huge. And second, beyond the Volga, lay the Caucasus oil fields. Germany needed that oil. Their whole war machine depended on it.
Okay, so fast forward to late August 42. The fighting's actually in the city now. What does Stalingrad even look like at that point?
Well, city is maybe the wrong word by then. It basically ceased to exist in any normal way.
Just gone.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Massive Luftwaffe bombing campaigns first, then just relentless artillery. It reduced Stalingrad to just absolute ruin.
Yeah.
Buildings shattered into these mountains of rubble. The big industrial sites you hear about, the tractor factory,
Yeah.
the Red October plant.
Yeah, famous names.
Just skeletal remains, twisted metal and concrete. It wasn't a city fight. It was a fight in ruins.
And that completely changes the game, right? No more open field stuff.
Completely. The battle became purely urban. But not like any urban warfare before. The Germans were good at city fighting, but Stalingrad, it turned into this unique meat grinder. House to house, yeah, but also basement to basement, floor to floor.
Visibility must have been terrible.
Awful. A few dozen meters, maybe?
Yeah.
All the dust, the smoke, every broken window, every pile of bricks, a potential death trap, a killing zone.
Which brings us to the Soviets. They were taking horrific losses. And the orders from Stalin, not a step back.
Exactly. Order number 227, no retreat, period. That desperation, that absolute pressure, it forced them to innovate. They had to find ways to slow down the Germans, bleed them, because they didn't have the same tanks, the same mechanized power at that point.
And snipers became the answer. Or an answer.
A key answer. A key innovation, really. Their role just ballooned. It wasn't just about picking off targets anymore.
They became anchors? Is that the right word?
That's a perfect word. Anchors for the defense. They were meant to pin down German movement, slow them block by block, and also inflict serious psychological terror. You never knew where the shot might come from.
Were the Germans using snipers, too?
Oh yes, the sources are clear. Snipers were a big deal on both sides. Notable for snipers on both sides is how one account puts it. But the Soviet command placed this heavy, systematic emphasis on using them, integrating them right into the defensive plans.
And the ruins themselves. They almost helped, created the perfect environment.
Absolutely. They were like a co-conspirator in this strategy. The destruction created literally thousands of perfect hiding spots, firing positions, lines of sight that were totally invisible from the ground.
So even a small group of snipers could do serious damage.
Devastating tolls, as historians say. They could hide, strike, and just vanish back into the rubble in ways that tanks or regular infantry just couldn't handle. They were vulnerable. The snipers less so if they were good.
Okay, so that's the backdrop, this hellish, ruined city. Now let's focus on the specific tactic. You said the sniper's role expanded, but this one maneuver, this was the extreme end of that expansion.
It really was. And it was a conscious break, a deliberate shift away from standard military practice.
So what was standard practice? For snipers, generally.
Fire and move.
Yep.
Simple as that, really.
Mm-hmm.
Both sides generally followed it. You take your shot, you get out. Immediately. Because the enemy now knows roughly where you are. Sound, muzzle flash, the angle of the hit, they'll zero in.
So staying put invites disaster,
Yeah.
counter-sniping, mortars.
Exactly. So the Stalingrad tactic, it just threw that core principle out the window. The sniper didn't move. They stayed hidden right there, accepting that massive risk.
Why call it suicidal, though? Where did that term come from? Was it official?
That's a really important point. Sources suggest it started with the soldiers themselves, slang reflecting the grim reality of the odds. But it seems it was quickly adopted, or at least acknowledged, in the operational risk assessment by commanders, too. It meant basically your statistical chance of survival after firing and not moving was, well, marginal. Very low, maybe less than 10%, if the Germans could react fast with focus fire or sending clearance teams.
So not suicide, like a suicide mission where death is the goal?
No, not like that. More like a mission where choosing not to relocate pushed the risk factor so high it bordered on near certain death if the enemy response was efficient.
Okay, that distinction matters. It wasn't about dying for the sake of dying.
Precisely. It was about maximizing the strategic delay caused by your presence, even if that meant accepting death as a likely outcome. The focus shifted from personal survival to tactical payoff.
So what was the logic? Why stay? What's the trap element here?
Right, the logic of the trap. It worked because the initial shot wasn't random. It was carefully chosen. High-value target, remember?
Officer machine gunner.
Radio operator, maybe a forward observer. Someone whose loss would immediately cause confusion, maybe paralysis, in that specific German unit.
Okay, so you cause chaos with the first shot.
And then instead of vanishing like they'd expect, you use the fact that they know roughly where you are. You turn your compromised position into bait.
How?
Because German infantry tactics and that kind of rubble, while disciplined, became somewhat predictable when they took a casualty like that. They had to react. Investigate the source of fire, send guys to clear the area, or cover the flank that just got hit.
And they assume the sniper's gone by then?
They often would, yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least they'd move forward with the assumption the immediate threat from that exact spot was reduced. They'd start moving, maybe less cautiously, trying to flesh out where the sniper might have gone to.
And that's when?
That's when the sniper, still hidden, maybe shifted just slightly, delivers the second shot. Often more devastating because the targets are now moving, maybe exposed, focused on the search.
Wow, so that second shot could be minutes later. Or even longer.
Could be minutes. Could be hours. It depended on the situation, the enemy reaction, the light, everything. But the effect was maximum disruption. It wasn't just about the kills. It was about the time it bought. An investment in delay.
Which brings us to the risk versus reward. Let's break that down.
The risk, as we said, was extreme. Getting cut off, surrounded, hit by mortars or grenades, pinpointed by a counter sniper. Just incredibly high.
And the payoff?
More casualties, yes, but mainly maximum disruption. Forcing the Germans to stop their advance in that sector. Forcing them to divert significant resources, not just a couple of soldiers, maybe a whole squad, sometimes engineers, maybe even flamethrowers, all to deal with one hidden rifleman.
So one sniper could tie up dozens of enemy soldiers.
Potentially, yes. And every minute those German soldiers spent hunting that one sniper was a minute. The main Soviet line behind them got to dig in deeper, reorganize, maybe bring up ammo, in a bot breathing room.
So the gamble changes. It's not, can I survive this? It's, can I hold them here long enough to make a difference back there?
That's the cold, hard, strategic math of it. The sniper's life, or extreme risk to it, became an exchange rate for slowing the German tide, for the survival of the larger unit.
Right.
So why did this extreme tactic become, well, rational, or at least necessary? It really comes down to three things that just locked together in Stalingrad.
Okay, what are they?
The terrain, the overall Soviet strategy at that point, and just sheer necessity driven by the situation.
We've touched on the terrain, the ruins, but let's quantify that a bit. How did it specifically enable this stay-put ambush tactic?
The terrain as an enabler was just fundamental. Military folks might call it a non-linear battlefield. Basically, all the rubble, the collapsed buildings, the twisted steel, it obliterated normal lines of advance.
No clear streets, no open squares.
Exactly. Tanks could just roll through. Massed infantry assaults, forget it. It broke down into hundreds, maybe thousands, of tiny, isolated skirmishes. Fights for a single room, a staircase, a sewer pipe.
Which neutralized the Germans' main advantages, their tanks, their combined arms tactics.
It severely hampered them, yes. It became an infantryman's fight, often fought at point-blank range, but with infinite places to hide and shoot from. The ruins favored the defender, especially a hidden defender like a sniper.
Is there data on how costly this was for the Germans?
There is, and it's stark. Between August and November 42, so right in the thick of it, the German 6th Army reported losing 60,548 men.
Yes.
Just fighting for these narrow sectors inside the city.
60,000, just in the city center.
60,000 casualties.
Yeah.
Killed, wounded, missing. It's an enormous number, and it shows how effectively that concealed, anchored defense was bleeding them. And the stationary sniper was the absolute sharp end of that strategy.
Wow. Okay, that number really drives home the second point then, the strategy of attrition.
It leads straight into it. Look, the Soviets knew they couldn't match the Wehrmacht's mechanized power in a straight-up fight at that stage. Not in open country. So in the city, the strategy became entirely about attrition, bleeding the Germans white, delaying them, playing for time. And psychological warfare was a huge part of that too.
Making them pay for every single meter of rubble.
Every meter. The goal wasn't just to kill Germans, it was to consume their manpower, their resources, and critically, their time.
And the sniper fits into this as a force multiplier. Explain that term.
A force multiplier is basically anything, a weapon, a tactic, a person that gives you an impact far bigger than its size or numbers would suggest.
So one sniper has the effect of many soldiers.
In this context, yes. That single sniper, hidden, staying put, could pin down an entire German platoon, maybe 30 guys or more. That platoon should have been moving forward, taking the next objective. Instead, they're stuck, tied up for hours maybe, trying to find and eliminate this one shooter.
So the sniper isn't just killing, they're controlling space and time.
Precisely. They're denying the Germans tactical real estate. They're dictating the pace, slowing everything down. That one soldier is effectively holding back a much larger force just by the threat of their hidden presence.
Which brings us to the third element, necessity and morale. Why was time so critical for the Soviets right then?
Time was everything. They were barely holding on. They needed time to stabilize the front lines elsewhere. They needed time to gather forces for what would eventually become Operation Uranus, the huge counterattack that encircled the 6th Army.
So buying even a few hours here or there could have massive strategic implications later.
Absolutely massive. And the sheer necessity, the not a step back order, the horrendous losses they were already taking, it just forced this brutal calculus. The high death rate for these stationary snipers was deemed acceptable because the time they bought was essential, whatever the cost. Wasn't just a slogan.
The sniper role changed.
It did. From just hunter to ambusher and anchor, their main job became delay. And don't underestimate the psychological blow to the Germans. Knowing that sniper was out there, was he dead? Did he move? Or is he still there, waiting? It forced every German soldier to move slower, more cautiously. It frayed nerves. It ground down their momentum.
So the tactic, as crazy as it sounds from a survival perspective, was actually a grimly rational response to that specific desperate situation.
It was a cold, hard, strategic choice, made under the absolute pressure of operational necessity.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty. The mechanics of actually doing this. It's more than just being a good shot, right? This sounds like it required incredible endurance, both physical and mental.
Oh, absolutely. The technical skill was high, but the psychological fortitude needed was maybe even higher.
Can we break down how they actually executed this ambush, step by step, maybe?
Sure. It starts with positioning and patience. This wasn't just finding a handy window with a view.
Yeah.
No, it was meticulous. They needed a spot that was basically invisible. That meant maybe digging into a pile of rubble that looked solid, hiding inside a broken sewer pipe, wedging themselves under a collapsed floor slab, using the debris as natural camouflage.
So they became part of the landscape.
Exactly. And the spot had to offer not just a firing lane for the first shot, but also concealment after the shot, and potentially a different angle or view for a second shot, anticipating where the enemy might react or approach from.
And then, we hear stories, hours, sometimes days.
Yes, just absolute stillness. That initial shot, the first shot in target, was critical. It had to count. Like we said, usually aimed at someone key, an officer, MG crew, someone whose removal would cause maximum disruption and confusion. That confusion was part of setting the trap.
Because they needed the enemy to react predictably.
Right. Which leads to the hardest part, non-relocation. Staying put when every instinct in all the incoming fire tells you to run. How did they stay hidden when the Germans knew roughly where the shot came from?
That's the million-dollar question.
It came down to mastery of camouflage and stillness. Absolute minimum movement. We're talking millimeter adjustments maybe over hours, using the dust, the debris around them, gray concrete dust, bits of brick, twisted metal to blend in perfectly.
Breathing must have been hard.
Controlled breathing. Minimizing any vapor in the cold, avoiding any reflection off a scope lens. A tiny glint could be fatal. They had to manage basic bodily functions in place, often using small containers or just enduring profound discomfort for hours on end until darkness provided better cover. It wasn't just hiding, it was becoming inert, part of the rubble.
The mental strain. Being alone, hearing the enemy getting closer, knowing one tiny mistake means annihilation.
Unimaginable, really. A supreme test of will. Soviet accounts talk about this, the mental conditioning needed. Snipers sometimes waited out half of a next day just for the sun to shift to give them a better angle without shadow, or waiting for a sudden snow flurry to provide momentary cover before taking that crucial ambush second strike.
So the second shot, was its main purpose always another kill, or was it more about terror?
Often it was about tactical demoralization. Yes, another casualty hurt them, but the real impact was confirming to the Germans searching for the sniper. He's still here. Our response failed. This area is not safe.
Which forces them to stop again, reassess.
Exactly. Stop, regroup, maybe call for heavier support like mortars or pioneers with explosives, or maybe even pull back temporarily. And that was the goal. More delay, strategic delay.
This sounds like the kind of stuff Vasily Zaytsev was famous for, right? The patience, the deception.
Zaytsev is the famous example, yeah.
Yeah.
His methods sometimes may be embellished in the telling, but they highlight the core principles. Using bait, like the helmet on a stick trick, or firing a blank to draw attention.
To make the other guy reveal himself.
Right. Waiting for a glint off an enemy scope or a slight movement. While those are more classic counter-sniping tactics, they underline the absolute necessity of patience, observation, and exploiting the enemy's predictable reactions. That mindset was crucial for the stationary ambush, too.
And the training reflected this. You mentioned the Lazur chemical plant.
Yeah, training wasn't just marksmanship on a range. Far from it. Records show they focused heavily on conditioning, making recruits hold uncomfortable, motionless positions for hours. Practicing observation skills, spotting tiny changes in the rubble landscape.
Less about hitting the bullseye, more about enduring the position.
A lot more, yes. They trained shooting through narrow gaps like observation slits in bunkers, or at torso-sized targets partially obscured by debris, simulating the real conditions. The emphasis was as much on concealment, patience, and endurance as it was on pure shooting accuracy.
And the results. Did the Soviet command see this working? Did the after-action reports confirm it bought time?
They absolutely did. Soviet analyses consistently noted that their sniper units inflicted casualties far out of proportion to their small numbers. But crucially, they documented the time factor, how sniper actions repeatedly stalled German advances, disrupted assaults, and gave the main infantry units vital breathing room to stabilize defenses, reposition, and hold the line. It was seen as a highly effective, albeit costly, tactic. Okay, so now we hit that really big claim, the one that resonates, that this tactic, this whole strategy, saved thousands of Soviet lives. We need to unpack that carefully. It's more about strategic impact than a simple body count.
It's a huge statement. What's the actual evidence that points towards this? How do we support that kind of interpretation?
Well, there's several strands of evidence that sort of weave together. First, the psychological impact we talked about. It's hard to quantify, but the constant gnawing fear of the unseen sniper definitely slowed the Germans down, lowered their morale.
Made them hesitant.
Exactly. Every officer stepping out, every machine gunner setting up, they knew they were prime targets. That hesitation, multiplied across thousands of soldiers day after day, translates directly into strategic delay, slower advances.
Okay, psychology is one strand. What else?
The sheer scale of the sniper effort. It wasn't just a few dozen guys. We mentioned Zaytsev's students. Earlier estimates suggest just his trainees were credited with something like 6,000 German kills.
6,000 from one group.
That's the estimate often cited. Now, imagine that multiplied across the entire front within the city over months. The total number of casualties inflicted directly by snipers was certainly substantial. But again, the save thousands claim isn't just about who the snipers killed.
It's about the delay. Connect those dots for us. How does stalling an assault for, say, half a day save potentially thousands of lives on the Soviet side?
Think about it logistically. Let's say a German assault group is supposed to take a key factory workshop, or maybe a crucial railway embankment by noon. But they get pinned down by one or two well-hidden, stationary snipers for 6, maybe 12 hours.
Okay.
That delay means the Soviet 62nd Army, desperately clinging on, has precious extra time. Time to ferry reinforcements across the Volga under cover of darkness. Time to bring up ammunition or anti-tank guns. Time, crucially, to dig new trenches, sight mortars, or move reserve units to counter the next phase of the German attack.
So if the Germans had broken through on their original schedule,
They could have potentially rolled up entire Soviet regiments, caused a localized collapse in the line. Thousands could have been killed or captured in that breakthrough. The sniper, by staying put and forcing that hours-long delay over one small sector, bought the time needed to prevent that collapse.
so the lives saved are the infantrymen who didn't get overrun because the line held just that little bit longer.
Precisely. That's the core of the argument. The sniper's willingness to gamble their own life bought survival time for hundreds, maybe thousands, of their comrades down the line. It was about maintaining the integrity of the defense, preventing catastrophic breakthroughs. This strategic stalling was fundamental to the Soviets just holding on long enough.
Long enough for the big counterpunch, Operation Uranus.
Exactly. Holding the city, bleeding the Germans, buying time. It was all geared towards enabling that eventual strategic reversal.
But we need to be critical here. Is there like an actual document, an archive file that says Sniper Tactic X saved Y 1,000 lives?
No. And that's the crucial caveat. You won't find a precise number tallied up like that. The phrase saved thousands is an interpretation. It's a retrospective assessment, often used by Soviet commanders and historians later to stress the disproportionate strategic value of what the snipers achieved.
So it's about the structural consequence, not a literal body count.
Exactly. It's saying, look, without this sniper strategy contributing significantly to the overall attrition and delay, the city likely would have fallen much sooner, the Sixth Army wouldn't have been bled so badly, and the subsequent Soviet losses would have been catastrophically higher. It's about the alternative history that was prevented.
So, bottom line, the tactic was incredibly high risk, born of desperation, but it was undeniably a key factor in the Soviet ability to grind down the Germans, buy that critical time, and ultimately win the battle.
Yes, the evidence strongly supports that conclusion. It wasn't the only factor, of course, but it was an indispensable element in creating the conditions for the strategic victory at Stalingrad, the victory that really did turn the tide of the entire war on the Eastern Front.
When you forge a tactic in a furnace like Stalingrad, under such unique extreme pressure, does it just vanish afterwards? Or did it leave a lasting mark on military thinking, especially for urban combat?
Oh, it left a profound mark, particularly within the Soviet military and later the Russian forces. It fundamentally changed how they viewed the sniper's role, not just as a marksman, but as a strategic asset in close-quarters fighting.
How so? Any specific doctrines come out of it?
The most famous legacy is probably the development and refinement of what's called the sixes tactic, often credited to Zaytsev's experiences and teachings.
The sixes, I've heard that term. Break it down for us. What does it actually mean?
Right. It's often mentioned, but not always well explained. The sixes, or sometimes called a six-man cell, essentially formalize the idea of using small, decentralized teams of snipers working together, providing mutual support.
So not just lone wolves anymore.
Not necessarily. It could involve, say, 2, 3-person teams, usually a sniper and observer security, or maybe 3 pairs. The key was they'd occupy multiple, carefully selected, concealed positions covering the same small sector, usually 3 main positions.
And the point of multiple positions.
Interlocking fields of fire and mutual protection. If a sniper in position A fired and immediately drew counterfire, the teams in positions B and C could potentially suppress that enemy reaction force. It gave the sniper who fired, even if they were staying put initially, a slightly better chance of survival or covering their eventual withdrawal. It maintained the anchor effect, even if one position was compromised.
So the lesson wasn't just stay put and hope for the best. It evolved into stay put, but make sure your buddies can cover you from nearby hidden spots.
Exactly. It was about systematizing decentralized observation, ambush, and crucially, mutual support in that incredibly dangerous environment. This focus on small unit integration, attrition, and controlling terrain through concealed positions became a hallmark of Soviet and later Russian sniper doctrine and training.
And does Stalingrad still get studied for this today? For urban warfare?
Constantly. Military analysts regularly cite Stalingrad as a key case study, almost a foundational model for modern urban attrition warfare. The idea that sometimes controlling small pockets of ground, creating psychological pressure with hidden threats, can be more effective than just launching big conventional assaults. The stationary anchoring sniper is a key part of that lesson.
Which brings us inevitably to the human side again, the moral questions. This tactic demanded almost certain risk.
It did. And the image of that sniper enduring alone in the rubble became a really powerful symbol in Soviet war culture. A symbol of incredible endurance, sacrifice, fulfilling that not a step back order to the absolute extreme.
And for the Germans.
A sustained psychological nightmare. That uncertainty, is he gone or is he still there? It had a corrosive effect. It elevated the sniper from just a soldier to this almost phantom menace, controlling territory through fear and potential presence alone.
But ethically, sending someone into a situation where you know the odds are stacked so heavily against their survival, that feels different from normal combat risk. It blurs the line between heroism and just calculated expenditure of life.
In the context of that war, particularly on the Eastern Front, which was seen as truly existential by the Soviets, that line often didn't just blur, it vanished. The doctrine became that the individual's fate was absolutely secondary to the collective survival, the defense of the motherland, the holding of Stalingrad at all costs.
Necessity dictated the morality.
In their view, yes. The operational imperative, driven right from the top by Stalin's demands, essentially rationalized tactics that accepted these near-suicidal risks. A soldier's value was measured in part by the amount of delay their sacrifice could purchase. It's a brutal calculus of total war.
And finally, we have the stories, the legends, like the Zaytsev versus Koenig duel. How much of that is real, how much is myth, and does it matter for the core tactical lesson?
Yeah, the specific details of famous duels, the names, those are often debated by historians. They certainly served as powerful propaganda, building heroes, embodying the struggle.
So maybe Koenig didn't even exist?
It's contested, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But whether those specific duels happened exactly as told, it almost doesn't diminish the core historical truth. The strategy was real. It emerged from dire necessity. The tactic of accepting extreme risk, of staying put to maximize delay and disruption that demonstrably happened, and it made a tangible difference. The myths grew around a foundation of genuine, brutal, tactical reality. The courage it required was real, even if the stories got polished. #outro.
So we end up back where we started. That lone figure, freezing ruins, dripping water maybe, the shot echoing, and then stillness. The instinct, the training screams, move. But the order, the brutal logic of Stalingrad says stay.
And that decision, that conscious choice to endure, to melt back into the wreckage and wait, that really captures the essence of the Stalingrad sniper's unique role.
And they weren't just hunters anymore.
No, they were anchors, living anchors, pinning down the German advance, buying those precious minutes and hours by forcing the enemy to react, to divert, to slow down. They controlled the tempo, not just with bullets, but with their terrifying, silent presence.
It's a different kind of heroism than the usual image of charging forward.
It absolutely is. It's heroism found in agonizing, isolated, silent endurance, in stillness, not motion.
So the key thing for you listening to this, the main takeaway maybe, is seeing the immense strategic power that can come from static commitment, from disruption caused by not moving.
Yeah. In a war often defined by massive tank battles and huge infantry waves, here you have the single rifleman deliberately choosing non-relocation, proving to be one of the most potent force multipliers the Soviets had.
It really makes you think.
And it leaves us with a final thought, perhaps. We tend to focus on the big arrows on the map, the grand strategies, the famous generals. But maybe, sometimes, the real turning point of a colossal conflict hinges on the quiet, internal calculation of one person.
Choosing not to run.
Choosing not to run.
Yeah.
Accepting those terrible odds. Making sure their simple hidden presence dictates the movement and the fate of many others. History isn't always made by noise and fury. Sometimes it's shaped by extraordinary patience and the profound strategic impact of absolute stillness.